So we're going to go to this question, and this is, what is the strategy to deal with a homeless person who does not have a mental illness, but just chooses to live on this street, yet panhandles and still accosts the residents and visitors of our community? So who wants to go first on that one? All right, well, Judge?
I mean, I think I'll go at some point. So, you know, obviously it's something for law enforcement first, so they'll, and I'm not going to speak for you, but they'll engage doing the pre-Ds. But if it gets to court, then it can come to court a couple of different ways, via a citation, which is a ticket with a date that they would come, or, you know, they're arrested. Oftentimes, if they get a citation, people who fall into that category, they end up missing their court date and they get arrested anyway. But most of the crimes that, you know, panhandling, open container, solicitation, those are second-degree misdemeanors, punishable by up to 60 days in the county jail. Okay, so if an individual has no criminal history, okay, and it's the first time doing it, then it is unlikely that they would receive any type of jail sentence. Now, if an individual has 30, 40, 50, and there's no mental health issue, which is very rare, but it certainly exists. Oftentimes it's a significant substance abuse issue, which has either led to a mental health issue or they were self-medicating. You know, one of the things that that CTC can accomplish is give people the opportunity, but if they don't take advantage of it, then, you know, my position in some circumstances is you give me no choice. We have tried to do things to make it work, and you keep going out and doing the same thing. And, you know, so they may get a sentence, and the state attorney's office has recently taken it more seriously. In the past, it was time served and first appearances the next day, but I think that there is a realization that where treatment is, and the individual is competent, competency is significant. But if the individual can make a decision and simply does not want to live by society's laws, then they are going to face an enhanced sentence. And that is something that has occurred simultaneously. And, you know, I think, and then this is the reason, and Captain Stiff commented on the enforcement aspect. And at one point, law enforcement officers from the Sarasota Police Department came to me to discuss the pre-booking diversion that they're working on. And they presented me with this flowchart, which was like psychedelic looking. You know, somebody had really spent a lot of time on it. There were arrows, and it was sort of a, you know, it showed how complex the issue is. Okay, well, if this happens, then that, and it was all these different colors, but there was this one red spot right in the middle, and that red spot was enforcement. And enforcement is not only through law enforcement, but through appropriate sentences within the judiciary, which is a function of what the state attorney does and what the defense attorney, usually the public defender, does. So it can be complicated. And without listening to each sentencing, without the state attorney's office paying specific attention and the judge paying specific attention on a day where we may have 200 cases, that person may get the benefit of a shorter sentence. And that's what happened in the past, but I will tell you that's changing as we move forward. So, so that said, that red part is enforcement, and it really is the minority of the individuals that you see. But there had to have been a mechanism to separate those who were vulnerable, suffering, and just couldn't get out of the hole from those who simply did not want to live by society's laws. So until we could do that and give people the opportunity, and if they simply will not do it, then that is when you have to impose enhanced sentences and take those cases very seriously.
And adding on to what the judge said, she is completely correct. One of my parts of my job is to work with the state attorney's office and the judge's office to discuss ways we can better bring to the attention of the state attorney and the judges. Chronic individuals are continuing individuals who frequently violate the law after outreach has not worked, after opportunities to change their behavior has not worked. They still want to break the law. So we are working with the state attorney's office to help bring those individuals into a compliance either by enforcement through penalty or compliance by just changing your behavior to take services. So I would tell you that a lot of things have changed in the city of Sarasota. I frequently get told that nothing has changed in the streets of Sarasota, but it's because that some of the individuals that we frequently deal with downtown continue to be downtown because they're not willing to engage in services. But if you think back a few years, you will notice that there are a lot of people that are missing from downtown that were downtown for a long time. So I try to keep that in perspective. It works. Don't expect tomorrow morning to get up and walk out and see that homelessness has been resolved. It's not going to be resolved. But if you start thinking about slowly the system does work and gives people an opportunity to either take outreach or take enforcement, and we will continue that effort.
I was just going to say that, however, yeah, there may be a few people that have that. I compare this when I often talk to case managers and I tell them how systems work. The first thing you do is they say, well, what about the person who can't walk and can't talk, and list a zillion possibilities? I would only say that as the people on the front line, our first objective is to engage in radical acceptance, where we accept the person where they are and try to do our best to move forward with them at the pace they are able to go. Sometimes what is on here is true, but it's not the majority. It's not even close to the majority of cases. It's a very small minority, and we just have to be careful that we don't begin to label the homeless as meeting this kind of description as the general rule, because I just don't think it's true. The reason why I know it's not true is because when we've gone to people who've been on the street for a long, long time in this community and asked the question, do you want help finding an apartment? They say, yes, how can you help me find an apartment? They don't say, no. Now, some of them there may be some like that, but the ones that we've engaged in that people have said, oh, she never will move from that spot, has moved from that spot.
I would just add, there's a lot of things in this question, a lot of parts of the onion to pull back. But I would just say that we shouldn't always assume that there isn't a mental illness. Just because it's not present when you interact with them doesn't mean there isn't a mental illness. There may not be a mental illness severe enough where law enforcement can come down and Baker Act them and physically take them to a facility, but there's likely, if they've been homeless for any amount of time, there's a high probability there's a mental illness. I think what also, and I'm not an attorney, but I think there's probably attorneys in the room, so correct me if I'm wrong, people probably don't understand that, panhandling is a protected, under the First Amendment, freedom of expression. Now, accosting somebody or aggressive panhandling is not. So there's a very fine line there before formerly Captain Stiff and Judge Quartermain maybe can interact in that. So it's not always as easy as a person's panhandling. So obviously knowing in what way they're accosting is where the line would be crossed as to where police would be involved.
Well, we've got everybody on this question.
I would add that there are things that we can do as a community. And one is to educate each other just about not doing what we call compassion malpractice when it deals with folks that are panhandling and other things. And it is educating people on the danger of incentivizing homelessness by funding that and directing them instead to services. I know it's been shared with me from a staff. One conversation I had with an individual, would you like to engage in housing? And this is the minority. I will back up what it said, but in this case, they're like, no, folks come by, they pick me up, they take me and sit me in a recliner, feed me when we watch TV, and then they bring me back when they're done. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you've got an incentive to do exactly what you're doing. And So I think it's important that we're careful in how we engage, and I found people surprised when I actually engaged with them in conversation in meaningful ways. I will tell I stopped with a guy who had a wonderful sign that says, "I won't lie, I need a beer." And that was his sign to collect and panhandle. And I said, I just pulled over and said, do you know that we're over on 10th Street? We'd be glad to talk to you about housing and help you with some services. As a matter of fact, the police were here today, and they've said, and I'm planning to go there tonight. So just know, as more and more we can have a community conversation about directing people to services and incentivize housing and the supportive services around that, the more success we'll have and the better the quality of life for all.
So the next question I have, and I'm going to actually give a partial answer to this question, then I'll pass it off to the panel. Ed, I'm sure you may have something to say on this one. It says, tell us, where are you going to find the housing for these people? The County Commission has been working for years with little progress. So the basic question is, where are we going to find housing? So as I mentioned before, we have philanthropy has contributed a large sum of money that is going to go towards something called rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing is a concept where we take an individual off of the street, put them in housing, and as Mr. DeMarco said, work with them to build their life skills so that they can be self-sustaining. But those apartments need to be in a price range where the subsidy to cover the market rent and the rent that they could afford and the subsidy equals out. Well, I thought it was interesting, and probably one of the most critical components of this question is that the county has. Well, if we are going to limit our view of housing options to just the city of Sarasota, or just Sarasota County, then we probably have an option. I have a brand new staff person that works with me. Her name is Jennifer Johnston. She's remarkable. She's really, really smart. She's a lot smarter than I am. She's up and coming. She's only been in Sarasota for a few months. Why is she in Sarasota? Because of opportunity. There are opportunities that stretch from Lee County to Pasco County for housing and other employment points of access for our individuals that were formerly homeless. So our concept is that we are not going to say you have to live in the city of Sarasota, you have to live in Sarasota County, but here are the housing options that you have. Just like everyone in this room has housing options, just like I have housing options, just like Jennifer Johnston has housing options. Go where the opportunity is so that you can better your place in life.
And I would just say that I have a staff of 11. And half of those staff live either Palmetto or north. St. Petersburg, Ruskin. And however, we seem to have this idea that we ourselves can live anywhere we want where it's affordable as long as we're willing to make the drive. But a homeless person must live within 5 square blocks of where they were picked up, or where they spent their last few minutes. They have to be near services, sure. They have to be near transportation, sure. But in St. Pete, there are they have a lot of available affordable housing. And I will tell you one other thing. People told us when unemployment was 20% that we would never find jobs. We did. And this last year, 700 people now who were literally homeless, that means on the street or in a shelter, found a place to rent and live. So yes, we have an affordable housing crisis here. It's real. We can't sugarcoat it. But it can't be, we can't say, okay then, I guess that's it. Homeless people are just going to be homeless. No, we've just got to work twice as hard, in twice as many places, in twice as many opportunities to make it happen. I'm just convinced we can do that, and I believe we will.
And let's be clear, this is not a forced relocation plan.
No.
This is the homeless person themselves choosing to live in a location where they have greater opportunity.
Yeah.
Major?
I would say, just as Ed said, we can't give up, so we gotta keep trying. And there is encouragement in having this kind of an option along with other things. And we do have a lack of affordable housing, there's no doubt. But just recently, I was excited to hear that we had 4 senior citizens, ladies who had been on fixed income, and they had a steady income. They didn't have a lot of other issues, but they simply could not afford a place of their own. But they developed community together. And the staff was heads up enough to go, you guys really enjoy each other's company. What would it look like if you housed together? And after several conversations and a wonderful landlord who had a price point that would work, they are successfully housed together. And so that kind of innovative thinking, how can we reproduce those kind of steps? How can we foster community among individuals that can overcome some of these barriers? So there's lots of ways that we can have effective success.
I would just add, this is a huge opportunity for our community too, even though we have this particular affordable housing issue, is that, the rapid rehousing is designed to build landlords to work with our population. And someone might say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, if we help put a tenant into a rental, we have the opportunity to be the liaison between the landlord and the tenant. We have the opportunity to mitigate issues around living in that complex. We've discussed, many communities have discussed a mitigation fund where rent would be insured to be paid, damage would be insured to be fixed. And so you can rent to me as a single individual, and there's no guarantee I'm going to pay the bill. There's no guarantee I'm going to damage your place. But if you're working with somebody who's supported by a case manager in one of our organizations, you're able to do that. I don't think we haven't gotten that far down the implementation path, but there are big communities who have done that. For example, Palm Beach County here in Florida, which one might say is a little bit similar to Sarasota. They actually had a unique approach where they looked at the property appraiser's website, and anybody who owned more than one residential property in the county were sent a direct mailing and a flyer and invited to come to a meeting. And they continued to do that over a period of time, and when they didn't think they really had any units that were available in the community, they found 120 new landlords that they didn't even know about that was willing to work with them. So we haven't, we're early in our implementation phase in this type of an initiative, but I think there's an opportunity there. I don't think we can throw up our hands and say, there isn't a place here. I don't think that's true. I think there's an opportunity there, and I think what Ed said is right. I mean, that's why Ed asked you. If you see a rental sign, call it, right? Same concept. So, and we can't limit to, we found this person here, so therefore they have to be housed right back where they are. We all should have a say in where we want to live.
So those are the only questions that I had on the cars. We have just a couple minutes left. 11 to be exact. A couple questions from the floor. I'll start here. Sir.
I'm interested in, based on my previous work in development of affordable housing. And I wonder the extent to which there has been efforts made to develop transitional housing, supportive housing, or mixed income housing with low income under the various state and federal programs. Has there been an effort? And what also is the city and county doing to try to attract developers to come in and do that type of housing?
Well, just recently, the property called Arbor Village is a mixed use where there are going to be affordable units. And by affordable, we mean for those who are lower income and something they can afford. They're also going to be in that same unit, permanent supportive housing for those who need ongoing support. So that is going to be a mixed use facility there. And there are others that are in the process of being proposed. I would just say that it's a difficult process that it doesn't really matter. I mean, we had a 4.5-hour meeting that I watched on TV because I had to stay close to the loo that night.
That's another information.
But there was a 4.5-hour meeting to try to determine if we could bring 32 additional apartments for those who are homeless and in need. If every time somebody wants to build or construct homes for those who need affordable housing, if it's going to take hours and hours and hours, it's not going to attract investors to want to do that or see a way for it to make sense for them. I think somehow we've got to streamline that process, but that's just me. I could be wrong.
And you have some of the champions of that initiative in
Right
this
here.
room tonight,
Yes.
who deserve acknowledgement. Anyone else like to address a question as to bringing in other development interests into the community? Okay, then we'll move to the other question, sir.
I recently moved here from Michigan, and in the county that I lived in,
Oh, I'm sorry. And I should have repeated the question.
I have a habit of taking things over.
I recently moved here from Michigan, and in the county that I lived in, this question, Mr. White, we had 87 odd municipalities, and we found that the homeless people and the panhandlers and the problems that we had, they moved from community to community because there was no overall coordination in the county between the different communities. What is the county doing to coordinate all over the county to where we don't have a problem here coming from Sarasota going to Northport or where?
Sure, that's a great question. Fortunately, we don't have 87 municipalities. We only have 4. So that's one big step in our favor. Obviously, you know, we worked in the development of a outdoor lodging ordinance, you know, that's really intended to bring people into our system, not into the jail, but making sure that those components were compatible with the outdoor lodging that the city of Sarasota had. We are now in conversations with both our Northport and Venice communities about adopting that as well, because we're absolutely concerned about if the rules are this way in one community and the spotlight is on that, then they're going to go to another community. And again, we want to make sure that we have a regional approach to that with all of our municipalities. So I think, again, we're new, and I think some of those, the southern municipalities are watching to see a little bit of our success. I think there's a concern about who funds the system. So that's a policy level discussion that all those elected officials need to have a conversation about. But certainly we're aware of that. We don't want to drive folks from one community to another based upon our enforcement of rules that are implemented. So we're in constant conversations to do that. And like I said, the city of Sarasota had some advanced participation or experience in doing that. And so we've tried to align everywhere we can to make sure that there isn't a incentive to move from one to another up here.
And one more thing, just for your interest. In Sarasota and Manatee counties, all 28 different agencies, organizations, charitable organizations, all keep a single database called the Homeless Management Information System on those who take advantage of services for the homeless and at risk. So that if you go into Northport Social Services, or you go to Turning Points in Manatee County, or you go to City of Sarasota and go to the Salvation Army, they can see the history of the kinds of services that have been provided, the plan that has already been developed, and the opportunities that might provide. So that's part of our coordinated entry and part of our homeless management information system.
So we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Nick Rossi, and I live downtown, so moved here in 2009. So I've seen this develop over the last 7, 8 years. I guess I have 2 questions. Was Dr. Marmots come as you are shelter a bad idea? Or is it just way before its time? That's one question. The second one is, give me a time frame for when we start to see the implementation taking a big effect in the county and the city.
I would tell you this, I'm just going to speak for myself on this, but Dr. Marmots' idea is a good idea in the wrong community. It was not necessarily, it's an idea which has been used in many communities. It just wasn't the right idea for this community. And I would say, in addition to your question about, we are already seeing some effect. And I would say in the next 18 to 24 months, we'll see more noticeable effect. But that will only happen if we continue to walk down the path of working together, not just the agencies, not just the people on this panel, but all of the community together to try to forge solutions and provide assistance wherever we can to deal with the issue of homelessness and the people who are affected by it.
And I would add to that too, all of the monies that we're talking about for the rapid rehousing program, you have yet to see any impact from that. None. What you've seen so far is primarily the work of Kevin and the city police and their group and the efforts of the Suncoast Partnership. But I have to address the Marmot, because I was the person that took Marmot around and introduced him to the city. Marmot, a slight correction, Marmot didn't recommend a come-as-you-are shelter. Marmot recommended 13, 14, what was the number?
It was 12.
12. Margaret recommended 12 things to do in the community, of which the come-as-you-are shelter was one of them. A come-as-you-are shelter is a low-barrier shelter, which is what you just heard the major talk about. Of the other 12 recommendations that were in that Margaret report, 11 or 12 are done. Coordinated entry, he mentioned. Hot teams, he mentioned. All of these other components that you've been hearing about are best practices, not only in the Housing First model, but also in this quote, come-as-you-are shelter. We, this group, took the come-as-you-are shelter concept and Sarasota-ized it so that it would fit into the needs and the budgets of this community and our elected officials. And frankly, that's been the key to our success. So
Thank you.
I want to thank, first off, please join me in thanking these remarkable panelists. And I also thank the association for giving me the opportunity to moderate, and I'll turn it back over to Peter.
Thank you. There's one less thing tonight that I'm going to wake up and worry about, and that's who's in charge and what they're getting done. We really appreciate everything you're doing. I know the community does, and although we took Survey Course 101 in homelessness tonight, people without home, we're going to do some graduate seminars later. So stay tuned. Look at the DSCA website. It's Downtown Sarasota Condo Association. And let me just, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you, Art Levin. Thank you, Victor Scully. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, John, and the other members of the DSCA who have been so very supportive of me in doing these homeless things, and who have actually been taking less of the credit than they deserve in getting this set up. So thank you. Stay and come back again.